Hello and welcome to the show. This week's Tuna Thursday starts with a Honda CRX from Snacky Night. Now we have seen a CRX before, and these cars, certainly in the lower classes, can be very, very fast. In the higher up classes as well, you can get a pretty quick track car out of these because they are incredibly light. They are really very, very light. This one that we have here is 1,648 pounds. That's one of the lightest cars we've had. The CRXs are incredibly light. I may have pushed it a little bit too much under braking at that point, just trying to get a bit more lap speed out of it. Yeah, it is incredibly light. Power-wise, 416, torque, 305. Power to weight ratio then is rather impressive on this car. I mean, most of the vehicles are coming with sort of around the 500 horsepower mark, but not very much weighs as little as this Honda. In fact, I think it is probably the lightest car we have had. The thing is, the other CRX that we had, I think, was four-wheel drive. This is front-wheel drive. It has more power, more torque, and is lighter. And all of that power and torque is going to the front wheels. And that is where we have an issue. Trying to put all of this power down when the front wheels are trying to do the powering and the steering all at once, it makes it a bit of a handful. In fact, it makes it a hell of a lot of a handful. There is a lot of power and a lot of torque for the front wheels to deal with, and it just can't quite do it. It's just not, it can't deal with it. If you get a bit of wheel spin mid-corner, you can be turning, trying to get the power down, and the car will suddenly just go straight. That's what it'll do. The second you get that bit of wheel spin, the car will stop doing the steering and you will be straight in a wall, which is not really what you want particularly from a car. It doesn't really help to get a quick lap time out of the vehicle when you're constantly fearing that. Because of the very, very good power to weight ratio, this thing is incredibly fast, accelerating in straight line speed once you can use the power. We'll see coming out of this hairpin, it is so hard getting the power down because it just spins all of it away, trying to go up through the gears once you've got it sorted, once you've got it going. And this was heading up towards the 160 mile an hour mark for this down this sort of straight, which is quite impressive. Even with all the understeer, it was possible to be flat out through the kink in the straight, which is, I think, quite impressive. I mean, we've had other cars have had problems through that corner. The most problem we have is normally with oversteer, but with the understeer that we're suffering, I was surprised that this car would be flat out through the turns. Other slight downside of front-wheel drive cars: the opening couple of laps, they have cold rear tyres, and while this isn't as bad as the touring cars that we race, it was still a little bit of a faff on the first couple. Once the tyres are warmed up, though, we don't have sliding around problems. It's just mountains and mountains of understeer that you've got to be very, very careful with. But as I said, acceleration, very, very good once you can get it sorted out. But you have to really make sure you've slowed the car down before the corner. You're braking, even though the brakes on this car are good, because it doesn't weigh anything, sort of corner speed is a bit difficult to be doing, because the minute you try and use even a tiny bit of throttle mid-turn, you just get a mile of understeer. I believe it was the first front-wheel drive car as well. It certainly did struggle a little bit at this track. Up next, from Foxy Devastation, a Mitsubishi Evo 8. We've seen a couple of Evo 6 goes around. Now is the turn for a more modern Mitsubishi. This one, the most powerful car that we had today. 509 horsepower, 430 torque. So, power-wise, it's pretty average, a pretty good power figure from the Mitsubishi. I was surprised; it's actually lighter than I thought it would be. In fact, this has been it's a very light week for cars. It's the heaviest car today, 2,556 pounds, which for a four-wheel drive, four-door car, that's pretty good on the weight front. I have to say that's not too bad. They may have got a big slide going out of the roundabout. For a four-wheel drive car, you know, with this much power, yes, you can get it sideways a little bit, as I have demonstrated. But it doesn't really like going sideways. This car it's actually kind of strange handling characteristics. It feels as if it isn't on race tyres. It feels like there is a real lack of grip with this car. It's very hard to explain. The easiest way, it just feels like it doesn't have race tyres. It does. I can look at it in the garage, and it has. There's no markings on the sidewall of the tyre, which says that this has got slicks on it. But it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like a lack of grip when you come into a corner. You don't feel like you can carry very much corner speed at all with it. I don't know why that is. I mean, yes, it is four-wheel drive. It doesn't feel understeery either. There's just not the grip there. And I don't know why. It's possible that to keep the PI in A class, it doesn't have upgraded tyre widths on the car. That would be my best guess as to what it is about this vehicle, because there just is not the grip going through the corners. I mean, with the four-wheel drive system, you can put all of this power down all at once, and oversteer really wasn't a problem with this car, aside from me being stupid at the roundabout and occasionally off a curb and so on. Oversteer, I had no problems with oversteer in this vehicle. I didn't have a real problem with understeer, just a lack of grip in this car, which makes it a little bit of a pain, in fact, to get around quickly. This is one of those cars that you kept pushing and pushing, and I was really struggling to find lap time to begin with. The way I ended up having to drive this car, as I occasionally have to do, especially with the four-wheel drive cars, is it was basically be slow on the way into the corner and then use the four-wheel drive to fire it out to the other side. That is the only way I could get lap time out of this vehicle. It was, a bit of a difficult one to get speed out of the car. Straight line speed, though, was pretty good. Again, another vehicle that was up to about 157, 158 mile an hour mark down the straight, which is, again, not too bad for straight line speed. It was taking a little bit earlier in the runs while I was trying to get the hang of the braking. The brakes weren't amazing in the Mitsubishi. Okay, yes, it's heavier than the CRX, but this is certainly nowhere near the heaviest vehicles we've seen. It just wasn't quite as sharp on the brakes as I was expecting. Again, easily flat out around this kink. It was just, a peculiar vehicle to get used to. Once you did get the hang of driving it slightly differently, then you could get some decent speed out of the car, but it was a weird lack of grip from the Mitsubishi. Up next, from Yuihara Tofu, I think that's the best I'm going to get with that game tag, with a Mazda RX7. The rotary engine in this does sound rather fantastic around this course when it's echoing off all the walls and stuff. The RX7, interesting choice of car for this one, because these things are also pretty damn light, 2,369 pounds in the Mazda, which again makes this one of the lower weight cars that we've seen. But because it is so light, it is a little bit down on power, shall we say, compared to some other ones. 434 horsepower, 327 torque, but again, power to weight ratio is pretty good in this vehicle, and straight line speed is again good. We're up towards the 160 mile an hour mark with the Mazda. There was quite a lot. All of the cars here were pretty quick in a straight line. When it came to the cornering, the Mazda was, again, it was fairly good. There were oversteer problems with this car. This was one of the vehicles that I've driven a few of them now, that weren't particularly fast, and I can't tell you why. I don't know what it was about this Mazda, but it felt like it was quick around the track, but getting lap time was a bit of a pain with this, and I have no idea why. It didn't sort of flounder around sideways through the corners. Yes, it was a bit oversteering. It did slide around more than I would ideally like, but I've driven worse cars than this. The straight line speed was good. It was doing decent speed in the straight line. The acceleration was pretty good. As I said, power to weight ratio is not bad in this car, so the acceleration was good. The brakes were phenomenal. One of the better braking vehicles I've driven, and you can see I may have missed the braking zone slightly into the corner before, but I was really pushing it on the brakes. This thing would get stopped really pretty damn well, and I don't know why I couldn't get lap time out of the car. The only thing I can think of is that it was a little slidey, and what I think was perhaps happening is that I wasn't able to carry the same corner speed. With the Evo, if I slowed the car down, I could floor it once I'd got it slowed down to that point. I could floor it out the other side of the corner, and it would just take off because it's four-wheel drive. We don't have the oversteer problem, whereas with this, I couldn't quite carry the speed because of the oversteer. That's the only thing I can think of with the Mazda, because everything else about it was pretty damn good. The curbs are dangerous with whatever you drive. I didn't have any extra special problems With the Mazda, I wasn't having to take wonky lines, as I said, on the brakes. It was very, very good into these corners. One of the later braking cars of the lot. It just wasn't particularly quick, and that, yeah, the sliding around, you can see here, I especially struggled with that turn, trying to carry any speed on the sort of the way through the corner. The back end of the Mazda was just wanting to sort of step out and be a little bit of a pain. Again, round here, I mean, it's sliding, yes, but it's not the most ludicrous of oversteer that we've seen. Like curbs, yeah, hit that curb on the inside with any car. The chances are only a few really can go across that curb and not have problems. Yeah, a bit of a bafflement on the Mazda. Again, this is another vehicle. I'm pretty sure this had race tyres on it as well. I'm not sure, but yeah, it did struggle a little bit for lap time. And our final vehicle today is from Big Lou 55. We have a TVR Sagaris. You never quite know what you're going to get from a Sagaris. I do like these cars. I like the crazy way that they look and the slightly crazy way that they drive. But when it comes to actually racing them, if you get everything right, they tend to be very, very quick around the track. But it's very easy to get things a little bit wrong, for the Sagaris to get slightly carried away and perhaps try to kill you. There wouldn't be my go-to racing vehicle on most occasions, because they're just a little bit inconsistent almost at times. You're never quite sure what you're going to get from one of these. So I'm always interested to see how they do when it comes to being tuned up. This one does very, very well. This one is one of the better handling cars I've had to drive, and it's strange to be saying that about a Sagaris, but this one is incredibly well behaved. One of the most consistent cars that I've driven in this series. I was setting very, very similar lap times for a lot of the 10 laps that I drive these cars in, which I was surprised that the Sagaris, I mean, this one here, it's got 433 horsepower, 372 torque, so decent power, decent torque, and when we consider this car weighs 2,003 pounds, that's some big power to weight ratio in this vehicle. Again, another one of these incredibly light cars. It's not the fastest in a straight line. It's doing around the 156, 157 mile an hour mark, but it's around the same speed that all of the cars have been doing here. So it's pretty good with the straight line speed. What's impressive with this vehicle is the way that it takes the corners. There is a lot of grip in this, and it doesn't step out that often. If you do push it really, really hard, as you could imagine it being a TVR, it will slide around. If you push it really, really hard on the exit of a corner, you can get the back end sliding. I got very, very close to the wall on that occasion, but it doesn't really like sliding around that much. It doesn't want to particularly be sliding around. It's even out of the hairpin, trying to put that power down. There is no problem with the Sagaris. It's impressive the way they've managed to tune this vehicle to keep it all under control, and then we have good straight line speed down this straight, and because we weigh very, very little, the brakes on this car are phenomenal. It was braking towards the 400 board, and considering we're doing, up towards the 160 mark, that's pretty good under braking. Okay, it may not be the most amazing brakes of any vehicle, but it got stopped in a hurry. And there really wasn't much to it. It was an easy car to drive around here, which you shouldn't be saying about a TVR. Normally, you did have to be careful of the oversteer when you were trying to, get the absolute maximum through some of these turns. You would slide it about if you slightly pushed it a little bit too hard. But for it to be as controlled as it was, and to have there were no real major issues with this car. I mean, the curbs are a pain. With a vehicle this light and rear-wheel drive, the curbs are going to be a pain. You have to keep off them, basically. That's pretty much what you have to do with all of the vehicles. The TVR didn't like them, so yeah, you have to be careful on that one. But it was so good handling, I didn't really have a problem with keeping it off of them. And when it comes to the time, it is the Sagaris that is impressive. It goes into 4th place, being only the 4th car to get underneath the 1 minute 24. So there's only just a 23.996 fraction behind the Lamborghini Miura, just beating out a Subaru Subaru Impreza. It's the first vehicle to break sort of the Ferrari and the Japanese dominance of the top of the table, going into a 4th place. I was really impressed. Sagaris was a really very, very nice car to drive and remarkably consistent throughout the 10 laps. We have to go a little bit further down to find the Mitsubishi Evo. It's in the very, very crowded mid-table. I mean, the cars on the screen here, it's less than half a second cover these 10 vehicles. A 24.823. It was a bit of a difficult vehicle to get that lap time out of. Once you sort of adjust your driving style to suit the car, though, it can be pretty quick, although there is a sort of a general lack of grip feel about the vehicle. We go further down to find the RX7, a 25.384. A strange car, that one. I still struggle to come up with where it was losing the time and why it didn't go quicker. I mean, it's not a terrible time at all, but a little bit of a mystery on that RX7, and it's quite a bit further down that we find the CRX. As you can imagine, with that much power going through the front wheels, it was a difficult vehicle to drive. A 26.865 put it just behind a Peugeot 308 and beating the MX-5. It just couldn't deal with the power. Too much power to the front wheels. A lot of time was wasted with understeer. Like, you can get away with front-wheel drive cars, but at Long Beach, this is not a track you really want a front-wheel drive car at. Just with the nature of the circuit, it doesn't suit the incredibly understeery, powerful front-wheel drive vehicles. Anyway, that is it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.